Okay, apparently I'm live and I'm determined to stop sitting here gormlessly looking at the screen wondering it's live. So I may have managed to not do that for once. Let's just double check. I am here and live. I am, yay. Oh, hang on, that's looking weird. Oh no, it looks like we're cool. It looks like we're cool. That had stopped. Wonderful. Let me get back in the zone, which means on Zoom. Here we are. Happy Friday to you if you're here, either watching live or watching the replay. If you haven't joined me before, this is the live making of all the everything. Oh, let me just double check all the sound is as it's meant to be working. There we go. I think it should be. So this is my monthly show where I go deep into a topic that's been chosen by the members of our Facebook group. And the kind of resulting show itself, which this bit's the making of, and then shortly I'll be doing the show itself, that goes out on our podcast as an audio. And recently we've started to put the video on our new, or it's not actually a new YouTube channel, but we've just started using it, so it basically is new. So that's the idea of what we're doing here. A few minutes late, mainly because I set it all up. I felt really organized today. So I got all of the description, everything all set up, ready for me to press go live. When I made myself a cup of tea, came back and it switched my camera off and there was no go live button. So I had to do it all over again. So apologies. To be honest, I'm usually late for this. It's just a different reason every time. So I'm going to head into starting the show itself in a moment. Oh, I'm just organizing my mouse and everything ready, and then as I often say, I'm about to kind of say hello all over again. So when you see me do that, it's not because I've lost the plot, it's because it's the kind of start of the show proper. So I'll be doing that in a moment. I just want to get myself organized and make sure I know what on earth I'm doing. This is, oh right, the dogs have just decided to start barking as well. I'll wait till they settle before I start to. No, I think he's barking about his dreams. He's just woken up and started. It will get more interesting than this, I promise. Okay, let's he's still looking like he's grumbling. I'm just going to hang on for a moment or two before I start recording. Okay, looks like we can start. Let me hit record. No, the dog's still grumbling. Oh my god, honestly. My life is like the advert of why you shouldn't work with children and animals. It's like a public awareness campaign. Okay, looks like Lazo's decided to stop joining in, so we are going to start in a mo. Hello and welcome to March's All the Everything. And yes, I did need to just look up and check the month. I'm not a nightmare. I just don't really have much of a concept of time at all, to the point where half the time I really don't even know the month it is. I can just about halfway through the year I start to get a grip on which year it is. But yes, if you're watching the video, you notice me look up before I said March. It was because I was checking on my Mac what month we're in. So here we are, this month's All the Everything. And oh my goodness, this is a juicy topic, as ever, chosen by our wonderful Facebook group members. It was a very close, it was a kind of tie for most of the month between this and something like how to run an intuition-led business, I think it was. So we'll see, maybe we'll have that one next month, but it was very close. And then this topic around devotion won by just a single vote just in the last week. So I'm happy. I mean, I could talk about either quite happily, but it's interesting actually, because a few weeks back, whilst they were still in a tie, I woke up and I was in that liminal between wake and sleep state, which I love. And I'm more and more consciously embracing that state and harnessing it for all sorts of things, to work through ideas and challenges I've got going on, or just to sort of see what wants to make itself known. And I was actually sort of almost going through as if I was doing this now, but in this kind of like liminal half asleep state. And then it just shifted, the votes just shifted, and it looked like actually we're going to go for the intuition-led business. And I was like, great, my intuition was obviously way off. So I'm not even going to end up talking about devotion. Turned out my intuition was bang on, and we were going to talk about devotion. So I thought that was quite magical. Okay, as ever, I will be talking about what I've been consuming, what I've been creating, and then we're going to dive into the main topic, how to invoke devotion as a magical way of life. So starting with what I've been consuming in the last month. And I actually decided, as ever, I've got quite a lot I could choose from, particularly in terms of books. And I decided to choose a book that I'm rereading. It's a book I read years ago called The Queen's Code by Alison Armstrong. Alison is absolutely amazing. Love her. She's actually been a 2-time guest on the show, and really would recommend all of her stuff. Listen to the shows we've done with her before. She is incredible. This particular book is one that it's probably my most recommended book. It's a hard one because there's a few books that I recommend over and over, but I suspect it could be my most recommended book. And it's written for women about relating to men. And it's written in a fiction form. And I would say the style of the book isn't to everyone's taste, let's say that. However, the principles of what she's teaching are so cleverly interwoven into the book. It actually has been interesting reading it back again now, a second time, and seeing how much more is in there that I missed the first time. It's like the more I've understood about intimacy, polarity, relationships over the years, through all sorts of other, not just through Alison Armstrong's work, but just, you know, through all sorts of other ways. Now going back and rereading it, I'm like, oh, wow, she was actually pointing to that here too. I just missed it the first time. So it's been a really interesting book to reread. So much there, absolute gold. And again, it sometimes takes a few chapters to get over if you're kind of like not liking the style. It does take a little while to get over that, but I would really recommend. I remember when I was reading it, I was messaging Jonathan saying like, I can't make it through. I'm gonna stop reading it. And thankfully I kept going. And so my advice to you is, firstly, if you're a woman, particularly if you are in a heterosexual relationship with a man, read it. And also, if you start to struggle with the first couple of chapters, keep reading it. You will be really pleased you did. You will thank me for that. So yes, I've been getting a ton out of rereading that, and again, in a way that I wasn't expecting to. I thought it would be a bit like, okay, yeah, knew that, remember that from the last time, yep, great. But it's actually been a lot more rewarding than I imagined. So also, if you have read it before, maybe this will inspire you to go back and reread it, and I suspect you'll see new gems in it that you missed the first time. What have I been creating? I actually was a bit stumped what to talk about this time. Not that I haven't been creating, I'm creating constantly. I just wasn't feeling particularly inspired, let's say, to talk about. I felt like I've spoken about a lot of the things already that I've been also then continuing, let's say, in February. And I decided to, rather than talk about a kind of thing I'm creating, which is sometimes, I don't know, a latest program we're creating or something like that, I decided to talk about the practices I've been creating over this month, which actually could link quite nicely to the main topic of devotion. So I'll share more about this when I dive into all things devotion. But one of the things I'm devoted to, one of the paths I'm devoted to, is magic. And this month in particular, this has been a kind of ongoing thing in my life that I've been creating for quite some time, but particularly over the last month, I've been very consciously creating practices to support me on that path. And one of the really, I guess, most noticeable ones, like most notable manifestations, is having meditation practice, which is something I've shared before. I've had a bit of a love-hate relationship with, probably true to say hate relationship, and kind of like tried and then stopped many times over the years. And in the last month in particular, it's been something that I've been doing very regularly, and really purely from a perspective of magic, in terms of how that supports me and deepens me on that magical path. I won't go into a big one in terms of like why it will right now, but the thing I'm really wanting to share here is how acts of creation, like living in a creational way in life, can often look like choices we're making in terms of how we live. It doesn't need to be a kind of physical thing we can point at, or even a virtual thing we can point at, like, look at this course I've created. Sometimes it's those practices, those ways of living that are in alignment with that deeper devotion that we have, a bit deeper intention that we have for life. So that very much for me has been what February has been about: putting in place, creating those ways of being that will support me on paths that I'm devoted to. Which leads really nicely into the main topic. I'm just going to take a mouthful of mint tea and then prepare to dive in to that gorgeous topic of devotion. So, how to invoke devotion as a magical way of life. So there's kind of clearly two parts to this. There's the devotional part, and there's how does that become a magical way of life. So I'm going to start first by talking about my sense of choosing into devotion, what that requires. And I wrote a post about this a couple of weeks ago, which is, for me, it's really important to first do something, and we can name this in all sorts of ways, but to first have a sense of who we really are at that deeper level. And so we could describe this as sovereignty or soul, or it's described often as true will in magical circles, or rewilding. I guess you could name, like, shadow work is like a way of creating this sense of like who we really are, this integrated sense of self. But for me, before we jump into devoting ourselves to something, there really does need to be a devotion to who we are before the conditioning, before the wounds that we start to have. I'm not saying it has to be like we need to be all the way there, but at least be on that path. For me, that is absolutely essential. The reason for this is without that, we are going to be likely devoting ourselves to something that is not serving. It isn't in alignment with who we really are. We are going to be drawn to devotion from a place of fear. It's going to be a sense of compulsion that's driving that. And we can see that in like its most extreme form when people have devoted themselves to, say, for example, a guru or a spiritual path, where, yes, they are definitely, the devotion's clearly there, and yet it may not actually be healthy or serving to them if they had a clear understanding of who they were and what they were here to do, who they were here to be. And so that's like an extreme example. But there are certainly ways that we can do that with it being less extreme. Ultimately, again, when we are choosing into being devoted to something or someone, having that sense of self first. And again, when I'm saying sense of self, I mean that deep self, that wild self, which I've obviously talked about, so many times on this show. So I'm not going to go deep into that. But again, when I'm talking about things like soul or sovereignty, it's really that sense of understanding ourselves, having a deep sense of this is who I am, and being able to relate to self, relate to the world freer. And again, I'm not talking about this in a binary way, like we have to be all the way there, like completely liberated, but at least freer of the restraints and the compulsions that have come about through conditioning and wounds, which are going to be there for 99% of it's higher than that. Almost everyone who's been raised in this modern culture, let's say. So with that said, and I was actually thinking perhaps I need to do a show all about sovereignty, because although I allude to it constantly because it's so it's interwoven into all of the work that Jonathan and I do, I was thinking, I don't know if I've actually ever done a show specifically about sovereignty. I'm pretty sure I haven't. So maybe that's one for the polls in our group for March. But again, that's the key thing I want to say. There is a real importance to first, and that in itself can be a devotion. My own first devotion, which again, if you're talking about it through this lens of devoting yourself to understanding yourself deeply, or devoting yourself to walking a soulful path, like go at it. I'm not saying don't devote yourself to that. That is, if there was going to be a place to start in terms of devotion, it's there. So, and that was very much my own conscious devotion. The first thing I devoted myself to was, and I think the way I talked about it then when I made that devotion, it was a vow, it was a very conscious vow that I made, was to live a soul-led life. I think that's how I named it then. And so if that's what your first choice of devotion is, brilliant. So I'm not saying don't devote yourself there, but I'm saying like that has to come first before anything else that you're being called to devote yourself to, because chances are without that happening first, and again, I don't mean all the way as in you're completely true to self and know thyself and all the rest of it, but at least on that path before that, it's going to be very, very challenging for you to be able to hear what you're really here to devote yourself to, that deeper calling, that deeper path that your soul came here for. So let's assume you are, and I'm given you're listening to this show or watching this show, chances are you're already some way on this path. So I'm saying all this kind of like trusting that most of you are already on that path. And so let's go from there, assuming that's already in place. So from there, you will have started to get this sense of what you're here for. you will have become more and more adept at understanding that voice of your soul. And that can speak to us in all sorts of ways. Clearly, it doesn't have to be a voice. This can be revealed to us in dreams, in symbols, from communion, in all sorts of ways with the wild. So many different ways. But ultimately, the more we're in this communion with soul, by whatever name you give to that, the more you'll have learned how to listen to what is for you, what you came here for. And so I'm going to share some of my own understanding of what I'm here for, which again came from first making that vow to devote myself to living from soul. So I think the first next reveal, as it were, after that choice was this sense of, I'm here in one way or another, and I didn't have it as clearly named as I do now, but there was this clear sense of being here to serve the feminine. And when I say the feminine, I mean the archetypal feminine, the divine feminine, whatever word you want to give to that. But that's what I realized I was here for, which I've spoken about before, particularly in crucibles like Wake Wild Medicine and Wake Wild Heart and Wake Wild Feminine in much greater detail. But let's just say that was not a realization that came easily at all. And often that's the case. These are not they're not often convenient, easy things that are revealed to us. For me, my childhood and my life and my deepest wounds would have suggested that I was here for anything other than to be in service of the feminine. And again, I'm not going to go into that in depth, but trust me when I say, like, this was the last thing I would have expected to be sitting here saying one day. And yet it was undeniable. It was so clear to me that that was a path that I needed to devote myself to, despite all of my resistance and my fears and my kind of like wanting to make deals and wrangle and wrestle with it. Ultimately, I could feel there was a deeper calling here that I needed to listen to. And what was then revealed quite quickly afterwards was, in order to, let's say, as it became more and more clear, like the devotion really was to be an embodiment of the divine feminine. Again, that's taken time to really be able to understand like what that devotion was, but it's, in short, that's a way of describing it, to be an embodiment of the divine feminine. And very quickly it was revealed that's not possible without also having a devotional relationship to the masculine, the divine masculine, the archetypal masculine. And so very quickly it was clear that the devotion was actually to both the feminine and masculine in different ways. And again, I'm not going to go, this isn't the point of this particular show, so I'm not going to go deep on that, but that was that was very clear to me. And this is going back a number of years. So that then revealed all sorts of things, and I'm going to this more generically in a moment, but for me that revealed all sorts of practices, rituals, training, creations, all sorts of things that were for me, were aligned actions I would need to take in order to keep walking that devotional path. The next thing that was then revealed to me in terms of a devotional path, and I'm not saying that everyone has a number of them. I honestly don't know. It seems to me that there is, so far, aside from that kind of like foundational devotional path of soul, there is this dual kind of feminine and masculine one for me. And then more recently, what's been revealed is devoting myself to the path of magic. Again, a ton of resistance, a ton of kind of like, oh my gosh, that's the last thing I want to do, which again, I won't go into in depth here, but that was the next one that was revealed to me. Whether you will have 1, 2, 5, I don't know. Honestly, this is something that in our modern culture, again, the devotional path is actually quite rare. Certainly outside of spiritual traditions, and certainly outside of like consciously relating and choosing into this way of being. So it's really interesting for me working with people in this way and starting to recognize like how this comes through other people. And so it's not yet like I have a clarity that is going to be necessarily one thing or a couple of things. All I can say is my own personal experience and what I'm starting to see coming through people I'm working with. There is going to be at least one thing that feels true to me that is there for all of us. Okay, so if let's assume again that you're starting to get a sense of what that is for you, and if you haven't, don't panic. Everything I've ever said on probably most shows of this kind, where I'm talking about understanding how to live more from soul, applies. You know, whether that be capturing your dreams, creating a practice of being deep communion of the wild, a sit spot, having a special tree. Sorry, the dog's decided to perform in the background. I mean, I could just spend most of the show talking about that, so I'm not going to do that again. Probably the most helpful show for you to listen to if you haven't already is the one I did a couple of months ago on harnessing archetypes. So everything I suggested in that applies here. And often archetypes and that kind of devotional path are very, very interlinked anyway. So go listen to that if you haven't already. But first and foremost, if it's not yet been revealed to you what that path is for you, it really is allowing yourself in all those different ways to be able to listen more deeply. It will be revealed to you. Once you have that sense, once that started to be revealed to you, again, it can take time, like hold it gently. Sometimes you might have little breadcrumbs, little senses of like, it involves this, but that doesn't really feel like the entirety of it. Again, each little breadcrumb you've been given, hold that as sacred. We can have a real tendency to reject something because it either isn't grand and impressive and like, oh my gosh, you know, I could say that I'm devoted to this amazing path. So we either reject it because it doesn't look big and amazing enough, or conversely, we can reject it because it seems too grand, too big, too like, oh my gosh, it's you know, who am I to say that's what I'm here for? So notice how that's showing up for you. I notice that show up for like, including myself, but certainly as I need to cough, sorry. As I work with others, I really notice that tendency we have in ourselves, which is that can't be for me because it either isn't amazing enough or it's too amazing and grand, and who am I to say that's for me? So just allow yourself to hold lightly and yet sacred whatever is being revealed to you. There will be a point where it does start to make sense. You have more of the picture revealed, but only if you allow yourself to keep being in this relationship where you hold it as something that's important in your life. Then allow yourself to become more and more intimate with it in all the different ways you're drawn to do so. And again, because in this this modern world, we're very used to looking for like, there's a right way of doing this. There's a certain number of steps I need to follow. And it's totally understandable we're going to approach it like that, because that's how most of us have been trained. That's how we've been taught to learn. That's how we've been taught to do things. When it comes to this path, it's really trusting yourself, trusting what's been revealed to you through like nudges, intuition, synchronicity. What books are being recommended? What do you notice that you keep seeing in all sorts of ways over and over again? Like, follow those signs and allow yourself to become more and more intimate with whatever this, let's call it a thing for the moment, whatever this thing is that you're being called to devote yourself to. I mean, there'll be all sorts of ways you can do that. And again, there's no rush. There's no like right way of doing this. if I were to tell you, for example, my own journey with devoting myself to the magical path, it's come in all sorts of strange ways. And some of them I could never, ever have planned out. I'm going to get to this in the moment, the way that this becomes such a magical way of life. You can't predict the way that you will be guided and provided to. So there will be, again, so many different ways that can show up. You know, again, talking about my magical path, it has involved books that have suddenly come into my awareness, podcasts, particular people who have become my teachers, deciding, like having a dream about a particular shaman who I'm now going to be training under. I mean, in so many different ways. And none of them I probably would have arrived at if I'd sat and thought, okay, this is now clear that magic is my path. What's the best way for me to now do this? It's going to be to do it in this, or these things in this order. Like that really hasn't been my experience of the way to allow this to be revealed in a deeply serving way. To trust yourself, like you will be guided, you will have those nudges and those synchronicities that will take you further along the path. Okay, just let me take a quick mouthful of tea before I move on. So something that we guide everyone that works with this in some way, like whether it be a one-to-one client in Wake Wild Sovereign or right now in Wake Wild Medicine, we guide them to create what we call a decree. And this is something they speak out every morning as a way of like deciding, like, this is who I am and this is what I'm here for, and this is how I will be living and showing up today. And so you can clearly see, once we have that sense of this is the path I'm devoting myself to, being able to speak that out as a decision, like this, I'm not going to show up in my life today and be tugged by all the demands and all of the kind of like, you know, like whether it be notifications on your phone, whether it be demands that come in from your household. Like, yes, you'll need to meet them, but not in this way where they are dictating to you how you show up. There is a real deep choosing that the way you're going to be in your day, which is really be in your life, is by deciding you are going to be doing it from this devotional way of being to whatever this thing is that you have chosen to devote yourself to. So this is something on a daily basis I will be deciding. And again, same for the people we work with, they will be deciding, like, this is me and how I'm showing up today. The decree includes other things, but again, once we have this sense of what's been revealed to us as to what we're devoted to, that will absolutely be in that decree. Another part to this, actually, which if I'd decided to do this in a nice neat order, I would have said before I just said the thing I've just said. But I think there's real power, and again, something that's really missing from our modern culture is, in one way or another, whatever that looks like for you, creating a sense of like a vow. And that could be in a ceremonial form, a ritual form, as simple as just speaking it out, whatever that is, like a one time, this is like what I've just spoken about in terms of the decree, is almost like kind of restating your vows on a daily basis. But first, just making that choice, that conscious sovereign choice. This is what I am devoted to. And I shared with you back years ago, for me, there was a real clear moment where I spoke out my vow to live a soul-led life, which was terrifying, actually, because I really did have this sense of like, this is gonna, you know, this will mean I'm gonna have to do things and say things and live in ways that aren't going to be easy. They're going to cost me in various ways. is going to require things of me that aren't necessarily going to be the comfortable choice. So there is real power in like consciously speaking that out and making that choice in whatever way, again, feels good to you. It could be in some elaborate ceremony. It doesn't need to be. It could be just a conversation between you and you, or you and the thing you're devoted to. So that's what I would say. Once you've got to that point of clarity where you're like, okay, this is what I'm being called to devote myself to, and I'm ready now to make a vow and actually commit my life to this, find a way of doing that. There is so much power when we consciously choose into something of that kind. Okay, so assuming now you've done those two things in the opposite order that I just described, so you've made your vow, you're now on a daily basis speaking that into being, deciding that's who you are and how you show up in life. Then how your life is created from there could look like all sorts of things. This is something where you are creating your life with that devotion as its centerpiece. So there are, I guess, more, let's say, like tangible ways that could show up in terms of, I will have various, like I have an altar that's dedicated to the things I'm devoted to. I'll have rituals that are involved in ways of expressing my devotion. And so, yes, there will be likely some tangible ways that you have created consciously as a way of expressing that devotion. But really, it's how you're showing up in everything you do. All of the ways that you now be in relationship to life, be in relationship to yourself, are an expression of that deeper devotion. So that could be in terms of how you then relate to your partner, your children, teachers that come into you, like teachers, guide, coaches that come into your life, the wild, your body, you know, really anything that you could possibly be in relationship to in life is an expression of that deeper devotion. So again, some things will be consciously chosen practices and rituals. And I named earlier about the way that for me creating a practice of meditation, which is something that, you know, left to, if I didn't already have that devotion to magic, there's no way, there is no way I'd be creating a meditation practice. However, as an expression of my devotion to magic, that will make sense to me. So there will be these like consciously chosen practices and just a way of being that flows from that devotion. I'll try and give you an example of something like that for me. It's interesting because, again, I'm so used to living in this way. Is I could literally choose anything in my life. So I'm trying to distill it in a way that I can articulate in a way that will be meaningful. So here goes. So since I've made that vow to the magical path, recognizing how magic can be infused into the work I was already doing with clients is an expression of that devotion. So you could look at, for example, I've been working one-to-one with clients for years. And so it's not necessarily that there have been radical changes in terms of the way that I work with someone. There have been like specific things I could point to, but it's more the way I'm relating to that work I'm doing with something through the magical frame. I'm recognizing what's possible, what's being created between us, what is available for them from an understanding, from a perspective of magic. In order to really kind of like ground this in things that make sense, I'd have to do a whole show in terms of like what magic means for me, which we don't have time for. But it could mean that, for example, again, I will be freer to move into practices with them, whether that be recommended practices that they do outside of the sessions, or something I might take them through, a journey I might take them through that might be, I don't know, a more shamanically inspired journey. All of that comes from my devotion to magic. So very few of those things are kind of decisions I've made ahead of time of like, oh, now I have a devotion to the path of magic, I'm going to now start to work with my clients in this way, this way, and this way. It's just an expression of my devotion to magic that expresses through me in all these different ways that I'm now working with clients. And the same could be said of anything else in life. That's just an example. How am I doing for time? My goodness, this show always flies by, which is a good sign. Clearly I'm having fun, but it always amazes me how quickly it goes. Okay, so now I'm going to get to the second part of the title, A Magical Way of Life. And I love the book Gene Keys. I've recommended it before. It's by Richard Rudd, and the whole idea behind Gene Keys is amazing. If you don't already have a Gene Keys profile and have the book, go get it. You will love me for recommending it, I promise you. I was rereading for about the millionth time one of my Gene Keys the other day. I'll show you the book, actually. It's a gorgeous book. I think mine's a little bit chewed by dogs, but hey, it's still worth showing you. Give me a moment. Oh, I just realized I've left it. I can't, it's not on its usual shelf. I've left it in the sitting room. Anyway, there was, I wonder if I can find the extract actually on my phone. I think I have got it. Let me see if I can find it quickly. So I was rereading something about one of my Gene Keys, which I think the one I was reading was about my purpose, as in like my purpose here in this life, which for me is honor, which is interesting because it actually the description that he has of honor is actually really similar to devotion, interestingly. So it's probably no mistake that I'm sitting here talking about these things. So I loved this. So it's about this idea of devoting yourself to living in service of a kind of higher ideal, as it were. So it's very similar to what we've been talking about here. And then the last line that he spoke about, and this was part of you can get a free reading, a free chart, as it were, of your Gene Keys. And then he does this little summary at the top where he'll talk about what that means for you in your life. So this is literally just part of the free reading. It isn't even from the book. And he says, honor lives within every cell of your being, and the more you align with it, the more powerful and surrendered you will become. I love that juxtaposition of powerful and surrendered. Like I could do a whole show just on that, actually. It is your truest nature, manifesting in every true action and decision you make. It is your defense against injustice, and it is your constant inspiration. As you serve honor, so it will serve you. And I could very much use the word devotion there instead of honor. So my sense of this, and this is why it becomes a magical way of being, as you serve devotion, it will serve you. And what I mean by this is, if we are, let's just say, again, let's just use mine as an example here, so I'm not constantly saying devoted to a thing. So if we look at my devotion to the feminine and masculine, the more I have lived in devotion to those archetypal energies, the more they have served me, which can show up. And none of this is possible to kind of like properly study in a scientific way where I can say to you, like, this wouldn't have happened had I not had that devotion. Of course, I can't do that. I can only speak from my own experience and what I've seen. However, what I can say is, the more I've lived in devotion to those archetypal energies, the more blessed my life has become, the more synchronicities will show up, the more opportunities will be provided to me that are in absolute alignment with me and what I'm here to do. In short, it looks to me, the more we are living from this devotional way of being in service to something that is, and again, I think that higher ideal is a good way of describing it, the more guided and provided we are, provided for we are. And again, it's possible to look at this, and I certainly, you know, it wouldn't have been that many years ago I would have listened to someone talking like this and got very skeptical about it, like, where's the proof in that? How can you know that's true? How do you know you wouldn't have had that opportunity to come in if you hadn't had that devotion? Like, you know, you're very entitled to be thinking all those things. I'm not here in any way to argue with that or to convince you. All I can say is, I know for me, living that devotional way has created this life, which is so blessed, so abundant. I do feel deeply, deeply guided, and I do feel deeply provided to. I obviously have a mind block when it comes to being provided to or for. Do both work? Provided to, provided for. Yeah, I think they do. That's why I'm thinking one's wrong, and I think they're both right. Okay. So in summary, let's just go through the like, if this is speaking to you, if you're feeling like that could be a way of living that is for you, again, first of all, whatever word you want to use for this, however you want to go about it, devote yourself first to knowing that deep part of yourself. And that, again, could be, you might name that as soul, you might name that as sovereignty, you might name that as true will, you might describe that as rewilding, shadow work, whatever the hell that is for you. It's all good, but start there. Only then start to understand, like, what is really calling you for you to devote yourself to. Once you understand that, make that vow. No rush to do that. Wait till you're ready, wait till you're clear on what that is, and then make that vow in whatever way feels good to you. And then allow that, decide for that to be something you live your life from. And again, so many ways you can do that. There's conscious ways in terms of creating an altar, having rituals, making offerings, all those things. But more importantly, it's just allowing it to express through you in your life, how you show up, how you relate to yourself in the world. I think I'm done. Let me just take a mouthful of water while I just check there's nothing else I want to say about all of this. I think the final thing I would like to say is, it seems to me that life here on this planet as human beings is all about relationship. And it can be possible to get very purist about these things and kind of like feel as though if we devote ourselves to something that is, and likely this will be the case, the thing that deep calling to devote ourselves will be something like not of this world, seemingly something non-physical, something spiritual, let's say. And there can be this real tendency in us to want to go like directly there. Like, my life is now all about being devoted to, whether we say that's God, or again, in my instance, like the feminine, the masculine, or magic, whatever the thing is, there can be this compulsion to seeing anything that isn't this direct relationship between you and that thing as being lesser than. It seems to me like actually the reverse is true. the deepest, richest opportunities we'll have to walk this devotional path will be with the world around us, and specifically in our relationships with other human beings. That's what I see over and over. And it's like, when we miss that, when we think it's actually somewhere else, we're probably missing the place that we could actually devote ourselves most powerfully. So I think that's everything I now wanted to say on the topic of devotion. Let me know if you've got any questions about any of this. And also, particularly if you're in our group, brilliant place to share whatever's coming up for you in terms of, are you noticing you are being called to devote yourself to something? How's that showing up for you? Love to hear more about all of that. If you are not already a regular listener to our podcast, if, for example, you're watching this now on Facebook or you're watching it on YouTube, and you want to listen to, oh my gosh, we're up to something like 312 episodes, I think, on a cornucopia of different topics. Go find out about that at primalhappiness.co/podcast. If you want to find out how you can be guided by us on this path of the soul in all the different ways that can show up, go along to primalhappiness.co/go deeper. We don't currently have any openings. Our next opening for one-to-one work in Wake the Wild Sovereign is in May, June time. They do get snapped up really fast. So if you are feeling called to work with us, and I say one-to-one, the way we actually work is you will work with me one-to-one and also Jonathan one-to-one. That's how we work with our clients. So if you're feeling that's for you, go have a look now at what is the link for this. I haven't said it in a very long time, which shows how rare these spaces come up for it. Hardly ever actually promoting it because it gets filled up so fast. So it's primalhappiness.co/sovereign. Spaces that are limited. We only do a certain amount of one-to-one work, and to say the next opportunity will be coming up in May or June. And so if you're feeling that's for you, book a call and we can talk to you about whether that is aligned for you. What else? Oh, and of course, I mentioned a number of times, if you're not already a member of our glorious Primal Happiness Facebook group, which I love, honestly, it's become such a gorgeous place. That's at facebook.com/group/Primal Happiness, and you'll be able to vote. We haven't got it up yet. Sarah, I guess, will be putting that live in the next week or so. You'll get the opportunity to vote on 3 topics, which is your favorite and want me to speak about on the first Friday of April. That's all. Thank you so much for watching or listening, however you've joined me, whether that's live on the replay. Lots of love to you. Have a beautiful rest of your Friday and a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.